In 1957, 11-year-old Joanna Pollock and her 6-year-old sister Jacqueline were walking to church in the English town of Hexham. They never made it. An erratic driver, a local woman suffering a severe mental crisis, lost control of her vehicle and struck the girls, killing them instantly. Their parents, John and Florence, were devastated, but a year later, Florence became pregnant again. Despite doctors confidently predicting a single child, she gave birth to twin girls, Jillian and Jennifer. There was absolutely no history of twins on either side of the family. The medical surprise quickly gave way to something entirely inexplicable. Jennifer, the younger twin, was born with a small, distinct mark on her waist. It sat in the exact same spot where her deceased sister Jacqueline had a birthmark. Jennifer also had a pale line across her forehead, matching a scar Jacqueline received from a fall. As the twins grew into toddlers, they began asking for toys that had belonged to their late sisters. These items had been packed away in boxes, completely out of sight. Yet Jillian and Jennifer identified the toys by name, and when they played, they divided the dolls exactly as Joanna and Jacqueline had years earlier. Their parents had never spoken to them about the crash. Despite this, the twins developed a severe, unprompted phobia of vehicles. If a car engine started nearby, the girls would cling to each other in terror, screaming that the car was coming to get them. The Pollock case forces a deeply uncomfortable question. Families often look for echoes of lost loved ones in new children, but matching scars, specific hidden toys, and identical phobias push the boundaries of coincidence. It asks us to define the exact point where a bizarre family anecdote crosses the line into something physically impossible. By the time the twins turned 7, these vivid memories completely vanished. They went on to live normal lives. This sudden fading actually aligns perfectly with standard childhood cognitive development, where early memories are routinely purged, but leaves the origin of those specific memories completely unexplained. Psychologists offer a specific mechanism for this, called cryptomnesia. This is a phenomenon where a child subconsciously absorbs overheard conversations from their grieving parents, forgets where they heard the information, and later recalls those details as if they were their own original memories. Relying on explanations like cryptomnesia, the mainstream medical establishment dismissed the Pollock case entirely. To scientists, this was nothing more than an instance of intense wishful thinking from traumatized parents who were projecting their grief onto their new daughters. Individual stories like the Pollocks are easily categorized as isolated family delusions. If you want to prove that a phenomenon actually exists, you cannot rely on a single haunting story from a small English town. You have to find a global, repeating, epidemiological pattern. Dr. Ian Stevenson brought a traditional, elite academic background to the study of these claims as the chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. Stevenson noticed a recurring problem in psychosomatic medicine. Sometimes, a patient would develop a severe phobia or a physical illness that could not be traced back to their genetics or their environment. He hypothesized that a third factor might be at play, a transfer of memory or personality from a previous life. To test this, Stevenson abandoned theory and built an intense field protocol. He spent 40 years traveling up to 55,000 miles a year, interviewing families, cross-referencing autopsy reports, and taking rigorous medical histories from children claiming to remember previous lives. Stevenson found immediate evidence for his hypothesis. On a single 4-week trip to India, he documented 25 distinct, verifiable cases of children possessing accurate information about deceased individuals they had never met. Over his career, Stevenson obsessively accumulated a database of over 3,000 deeply vetted case files. He took reincarnation, a concept typically reserved for mystical or religious belief, and forced it into a quantifiable scientific dataset. When Stevenson analyzed these 3,000 cases, he found his most crucial insight. These children weren't reporting random, chaotic visions. Whether the child was in Alaska, Lebanon, or Sri Lanka, the cases followed a strict, universal blueprint. This line chart tracks the timeline of past life recall across Stevenson's subjects. The data shows that these statements begin spontaneously and sharply at age 2 or 3, and, exactly like the Pollock twins, the memories flatline and fade away almost completely by age 7. If we adjust this visualization to look at how the previous lives ended, we see another massive correlation. 70% of the deaths described by the children were unnatural or violent. This intense trauma consistently manifested as severe, specific phobias in the Mew child's life, like a fear of water after a drowning, or a fear of cars. Stevenson also tracked physical anomalies. He documented over 200 cases where a child was born with birthmarks or birth defects that directly matched the fatal wounds of the deceased. In rural Thailand, a 3-year-old boy named Chennai claimed he had been a teacher who was shot in the head. Chennai was born with 2 distinct birthmarks, a small round mark on the back of his head and a larger irregular mark on the front. Stevenson tracked down the teacher's widow, who confirmed the doctor had described those exact unrecorded entrance and exit wounds. It is easy to assume this only happens in Hindu or Buddhist cultures, where families already expect reincarnation. But Stevenson found dozens of cases in the United States. A girl named Kendra Carter began recounting specific details of an abortion to her swimming coach, details the coach had kept secret for 9 years. Kendra's mother, a conservative Christian, was completely opposed to the very concept of reincarnation. The sheer volume of these exact repeating patterns forces a difficult evaluation. If this data doesn't represent actual reincarnation, we have to identify what specific psychological mechanism is universally tricking thousands of disconnected children around the globe in the exact same way. The scientific community's response to Stevenson's database was fierce. Philosophers like Paul Edwards argued that Stevenson's results were undermined by confirmation bias and anecdotal evidence, rather than controlled experimental work. This bias suggests but a toddler's battling is nurturally vague. Grieving parents, looking for a connection, unconsciously encourage fantasies and connect dots that aren't really there, shaping a child's random statements into a coherent narrative of a deceased person. This points directly to Stevenson's greatest methodological flaw. In the vast majority of the cases he investigated, the family of the child and the family of the deceased had already met, spoken, and exchanged information long before Stevenson arrived with his notepad. Because human grief is so powerful, and because memory is notoriously pliable, cross-contamination between families is almost guaranteed. Even a meticulously organized database of 3,000 cases cannot equate to empirical, laboratory-grade proof if the initial witnesses are compromised. Stevenson himself actually conceded this point. He never claimed his work provided absolute proof of reincarnation. He simply maintained that for the strongest and least contaminated cases in his files, a transfer of consciousness remained the best available explanation. Despite the heavy pushback, brilliant, highly skeptical scientific minds paid attention. Astronomer Carl Sagan, a famous debunker of pseudoscience, explicitly admitted that the phenomenon of young children reporting accurate details of previous lives was one of the few claims in parapsychology that actually deserved serious scientific study. When Stevenson died in 2007, he left behind one final experiment. He set a combination lock to a secret word, placed it in a filing cabinet in his university department, and told his colleagues he would try to transmit the code to them from the afterlife. The lock remains unopened. Whether these 3,000 children are evidence of wandering souls, or simply proof of a hidden psychological reaction to trauma, they point to a significant gap in our understanding of how the human mind processes death. The transfer of memories and physical traits between individuals remains a question.